Want to take a look now. This is the north portico of the White House. You see the president and the first lady, the Bidens there. They are going to be greeting the vice president, Kamala Harris, as she returns to the White House one last time. And we should note, too, of course, the president-elect and his wife will soon be making their way to the White House for the traditional tea and a discussion of the two of them together. And then the president and the president-elect will ride together to the United States Capitol. Let's take a moment here and just watch what's happening. Robert?
What a moment for President Joe Biden, elected to the Senate in 1972, sought the presidency, 1988, 2008, 8 years as vice president to President Obama. Now this political career, after more than a half century, comes to an end. Some disappointment in Democratic ranks, but a lot of pride in President Biden's inner circle about what he accomplished on domestic and foreign policy over the last 4 years. I want
to bring in senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. She is at the White House. And Weijia, as we look at these pictures of the president and the vice president, they are leaving office with some breaking news, issuing some final preemptive pardons. What have we learned?
That's right, Nora. We know that President Biden has already issued more than 4,000 pardons, especially in his final weeks of office. But he chose to use the final hours of his presidency to issue these preemptive pardons. And it matters because it's not about the personal individuals. It really speaks to the state of politics in this country today. And he essentially said in a lengthy statement that he wants to protect these people from revenge, because even though Gail said revenge, success might be the best form of revenge, we know what the president-elect has said extensively about payback, about retribution, about going after his political enemies. And so that is why today President Biden issued these pardons. He said, I am exercising my authority under the Constitution to pardon General Mark A. Milley, Dr. Anthony S. Fauci, the members of Congress and staff who served on the Select Committee, and the U.S. Capitol and D.C. Metropolitan Police officers who testified before the Select Committee. Of course, that is in reference to investigating what happened 4 years ago on January 6th. And notably, it includes some of Trump's fiercest political rivals, including two Republicans, former Congresswoman Liz Cheney and former Congresswoman Adam Kinzinger, along with Adam Schiff. And so, Nora, again, this really speaks to where President Biden is thinking could happen as President-elect Trump takes office. And as you mentioned, he is preparing now to welcome President-elect Trump and the First Lady, Melania Trump, here to the White House for that traditional tea. They will spend a lot of intimate moments together. But Nora, based on the pardons today, based on what we heard from President Biden in his final days here at the White House, speaking about the warnings to come with a new administration, as you can imagine, those moments, those conversations could be tense.
And Weijia, we understand that President Biden just spent his final moments inside the Oval Office?
That's right. This morning, he received his final presidential daily brief, and I did peek in front of the West Wing, as you know very well. If there's a Marine sentry standing there, standing guard, it means that he is inside the Oval Office, and he was there, but he must have had a quick walk to the North Portico to prepare to welcome guests here to the White House. But I did speak to aides this morning who said it was really important to him to have that time in the Oval, because it's not just capping the past 4 years of his presidency, it is capping an entire political career. And we don't know where he goes from here, Nora, but at the end of today, he will be heading off to California for some rest. And we know last night he said, I'm not going anywhere. He said he wants to stay engaged, and we should expect to hear more of him. Nora.
And Weijia, we understand President Biden left a letter for the incoming president?
He is expected to leave a letter, Nora. We are told, of course, he is an institutionalist, which is exactly why he is hosting the Trumps here, why he is participating in all the traditions. And we know that this letter, that presidents leave for each other, means a lot to Donald Trump, because he has spoken about how much the letter that President Obama left him meant to him years ago. And we know that despite the fact that Trump decided not to participate in all the traditions that we are talking about and celebrating today when it comes to the peaceful transfer of power. Of course, he left town the morning of inauguration. Even Trump left a letter for President Biden on the Resolute desk of the Oval Office. So we certainly expect President Biden to do the same today. Nora?